everyone, welcome back to Going Solo. My name is Evan Smith, and today I am very excited to be diving into a game overview and gameplay video for Deep Rock Galactic from Mood Publishing. This comes from a very successful Kickstarter which funded and is currently heading towards fulfillment. And I really wanted to show you what this game looks like on the tabletop, how it flows and operates from a solo perspective. For those unfamiliar with Deep Rock Galactic, this tabletop experience stems from a very popular computer game which has now been adapted for the tabletop. You're going to be taking on the role of up to 4 dwarf miners in space. You have the scout, the engineer, the gunner, and the driller. I will be showing you those different boards in just a moment. Players are going to work together to mine precious minerals deep below the surface of a hostile planet where you have a whole bunch of insectoid predators trying to come after you. Now, they're going to be aggressively trying to defend their caves against the intruders, and you're considered an intruder in this case. So is your team going to be able to meet the mineral quota set by the company, or will you end up as dinner for these insectoids? When playing in solo mode, you have 2 options. You can either go into the gameplay controlling all 4 dwarfs, or, as I've done, I've set up for a true solo mission with just a single one, and I've chosen the driller. Again, I'll show you the player board in just a moment. And when you're just playing with 1 dwarf, you also have Bosco, who's going to come in as a bot to help you out. The overall goal of the game is to complete the objectives described on each mission page. So you'll be going through a series of missions inside the game. You can play these as part of a campaign, or you can do them as one-off. Once you've collectively, or if you're playing solo by yourself, completed those objectives and move your dwarf miniatures aboard the drop pod for safe evacuation, if you're wondering where that is, it's exactly in the colored area where my dwarf currently sits, the driller, then you are able to succeed at that mission. The mission is lost if the swarm threat marker, which is a marker on a track at the bottom of the board, this black marker right here happens to go from its starting position all the way to the end of the track, and it needs to advance, or you lose if all dwarves are unconscious at the same time. Before the game starts, players have to agree, or if you're playing solo, you have to decide on the hazard level, which determines the difficulty of the game, and the missions can be played across 5 different hazard levels. You'll see them in the first 3 positions on the hazard track. You simply choose which level you want to start at, place the tracker in that position, and as you'll see, that is going to diminish how many spaces you have overall, how much time you have, and how quickly those insectoids are coming at you. It's worth noting, if you decide to jump up to hazard level 4 and 5, you have to place additional grunts at each tunnel exit at the start of the game. So you're going to have more enemies to deal with than you would normally. If you go to hazard 5, grunts are also stronger now, so when attacking, they're going to deal 1 damage on the exclamation result on the die. For this mission, I've chose hazard level 2. The instructions for setting up a game across Deep Rock Galactic is going to come from the rulebook in terms of the high-level setup instructions. It'll also point you to the mission book, where once you know which mission you are going to play, in this case we're playing mission number 1, you'll use that in order to fill out the game board as I have done here in the center. Let's quickly talk about the components around the outside of the board, and then we'll dig into what we're seeing in the center. We'll first move into the decks of cards, and it's worth mentioning the mission booklet might tell you to change or remove or update specific cards in these decks based on the mission setup, so make sure you check that to see if anything needs to be updated prior to going forward with your gameplay. In the top left-hand corner here, we have an arrow pointing up. This is the event deck, and then to the right of it, we have the swarm deck. On the Deep Rock Galactic logo space, you can keep every resource and everything you've gained while digging around inside the caverns in this location. Another option is to use the mule miniature in order to house all the resources that you gather inside of it. The next deck going down the row is the Rock and Stone deck, and the one following it is the Supply Pod deck. When the Supply Pod comes into play, you can use the miniature to represent this or a token. We have a few things that are not on the game board, and that is going to start with the Throwables deck, the one with the grenade icon on it. To the right of that, we have the Secondary Weapon deck, which is placed there as well, and then just underneath of it, we have the Primary Weapon tokens. We now move on to tokens and markers, a whole bunch of them across these game trays. The game trays themselves are not part of Deep Rock Galactic, but they're handy for storage. We have red health cubes up top. We have damage cubes. We have ammo tokens, whether they're primary or secondary. We have special condition tokens like stunned, frozen, webbed. We also have things like proximity bombs, satchel charges. We have inhibitor fields, shields, flames, all kinds of different tokens sorted through these trays. We also have some single area tokens or single single hex tokens, which as the driller or other individuals continue to explore inside of the mission into the darker areas of the board, these single hexes will be put into play. And of course, we have a pile of dice. There's 14 to be exact, and these are all custom made. Something else that I put around the game board is this Hostile Creatures reference card, which has a description, the resistances of each of the enemies, the creature, the stats. This is really handy to have face up, as you can quickly reference the enemies and what they're going to do when their turns come around. So the components around the game board all talked about, we're going to now move to character selection. And I've selected the driller, as you've already likely noticed. And you'll see the artwork for the driller in the very middle. This is a recessed area. Down here at the bottom, we have health. There's 5 red cubes to represent that health. Over here on the left, we have the primary weapon, which is a flamethrower in my case. This tells us the range of it, as well as the dice we're rolling and tokens that might be used when using the weapon. In this case, I've got these tokens sitting right here. I'll talk more about how they're used on the game board when we get into gameplay. We also have to have ammo from our primary weapon. So in these 5 recessed spots, we have to put in 5 primary ammo tokens. And then we have some abilities down here which are specific to the driller, which is nice. We have one for close combat and one for movement. On the right-hand side of the game board, a little bit different. This is not printed on. We actually place a card in here from the secondary weapons deck. We get to choose what that weapon is from the deck, and it's recommended you pick something that does not have the same color as your primary weapon. You still can do that. You can match the color if you want, but this just gives you a little more flexibility on the things you can do out there. So I went ahead with the jury-rigged broomstick, and you're also going to need ammo for that, but you don't get to fill it to 5 for secondary, only 3 to start things out. And then here we've got a couple cards on either side. This one is a rock and stone, so you draw it from the top of the deck. It gives you an ability. In this case, it says if you don't rock and stone, you ain't coming home. And we got a reroll on this one, which should be good. And then over here, we have a throwable. This comes from this deck right here with the grenade icon on it, and it's going to allow us to roll a green die from range 4, and it's going to affect a certain area. As promised, here's a look at the other dashboards for the other dwarves, which I will not be using. Again, if you want to play solo and control all 4 of them, you absolutely can. This also gives you a glimpse as to what the dashboards look like without things in them and all the recessed areas for stuff. You're going to have unique abilities for each of the characters. You're going to have a unique primary weapon to start. So each of these characters is going to be able to focus on something different than the others, which makes them, of course, very useful. And at the very top, we have the Scout. All 3 of these dwarves will not be used in this video. And of course, these 3 dwarves all have unique miniatures as well. At this point, let's now focus on the mission, which is set up on the game board, and we are diving into mission number 1, New Darkness, New Fortunes. And we're going to play through a handful of rounds to show you how this thing operates and flows. It states in the narrative, Saddle up, dwarves. Recent tectonic activity on Hoxus 4 has opened up a brand new sector for us to explore and exploit. Recon drones have reported the location of several Morkite deposits in a shallow cave system with some precious Apoca blooms. This is a straightforward mission. Descend into the cave system using the drop pod and mine 5 Morkite and 3 Apoca blooms. Then get out of there before every beast on the planet wakes up and starts hunting you for breakfast. Parts of the cave system will require you to use your traversal tools like the platform gun, grappling hook, and zip lines, unless of course you prefer digging your way through the soil to get around the deep pits. Good luck down there. And of course, what they said at the latter part of that is certainly going to apply because we're using the driller. So at this point, we've gone ahead and read the mission briefing. We now know the objective. It's actually mentioned in here as well as here. Clearly says 5 Morkite and 3 Apoca blooms. We know exactly what they look like. The Apoca blooms are going to come off of tokens. We'll talk about those in a second. And then it states before starting, we're supposed to remove a couple cards or certain cards from the Swarm deck. As I mentioned before, for the decks, you're shuffling them together and place them on the board quite easily, but the mission might dictate you remove certain cards. So be aware of this in the mission booklet and keep an eye on it. And then down below, it has a mission-specific event. You don't resolve this right now. This specific event is going to be resolved based on a card flipping over during gameplay, which will tell you to reference the mission-specific event. In this case, going forward, it's going to be the grunt nest, which means more grunts are going to be coming out of each tunnel exit every single time we see a mission-specific card. Here's a look at the setup, which I followed in order to place everything where it belongs. It's worth mentioning there are certain tokens which are a little more generic, like these ones right here representing minerals. What it's telling you to do is take a look at this top section right here. You're going to put all of these minerals based on the counts inside of a black bag, which is included inside the game box. You're going to choose one of these locations and work your way either counterclockwise counterclockwise or clockwise, pulling one at a time, and each of them are going to be placed in one of those spaces, which is going to change up the way in which each level is set. Of course, if you replay it, things will be in different spots, and of course, if you're going after certain minerals, that's going to change where you're headed in that particular mission as well. So once you have all these minerals across all of these mineral slots, you're good to go. Then you also have 5 of these tokens, which you're going to flip over and randomly place on the game board. On the opposite side, they have question marks. Along the bottom, it'll also let you know how many different types of enemies are involved. Because we're playing mission number 1, things are quite simplistic. We just have to deal with grunts at the moment. And that's not saying that something from a card couldn't bring something else into the equation, but for right now, grunts are all we need, and it even tells us exactly where to place them. And remember, the mission-specific event will tell us to place additional ones here and here whenever we pull it. So the setup for mission number 1 for me is complete. It's worth mentioning that the drop pod, which comes into play right here, brings all 4 dwarves in if you're actually controlling all 4, because I'm just controlling the driller. He just goes in the driller space. And then in terms of Bosco, the bot, because when I'm playing true solo, I get a bot, he's just placed 1 space adjacent to the pod. Doesn't matter which of the 2 I choose, whichever one I'd like. So those ones are placed. Everything else is set up based on the mission booklet. It's worth mentioning your setup for your first time will likely not have the minerals in the exact same positions that mine are, because every single time they come into the bag at random, they could end up in different spaces as you're putting them around the game board. We're going after 5 Morkite, and we're going after some flowers as well. Those flowers are hidden away in some of these tokens. So we're going to have to uncover tokens in order to find them. The tokens, which are flipped over and have the question marks, get placed on these flare spaces, so you know exactly where they're supposed to be. And there's 5 of them as depicted in the mission. And we have Morkite represented here in the light teal or bluish color. And the red, we have Nitra, and then we have gold over here. There's nothing stopping us from collecting all of these resources, but remember, time is against us, we have enemies coming after us, and we have a mission to focus on. At this point, you have a great idea as to all the components that you're seeing in front of you, the mission setup, and the character which I've selected, and my bot, Bosco. We are ready to dive into the very first round of play, so let's get going with some gameplay. During gameplay, players will take turns in clockwise order. If you're playing solo, you'll be taking turns one after the other. But inside of the turn, there is 2 consecutive phases happening. You have the action phase and the event phase. We're starting with the action phase. During the action phase, you can carry out up to 3 actions. You can choose to take less actions if you wish, but within those 3 actions that you can take, you can do the same one multiple times if you wish, and you have a number of different actions to choose from. You can choose to move, attack, use your pickaxe, use a throwable, overclock your secondary weapon, you can resupply, exchange supplies, you can assist or revive, and for free, you can play rock and stone cards. And this represents that the drop pod has left, and you are now here fending for yourself, trying to complete your objectives as we talked about before. And when the drop pod comes back, it will be back in the same location. And finally, for movement, you may move through other dwarves in play. We don't have any, but we do have Bosco the bot, who I will be controlling after my dwarf has taken its turn. I can also move through sentry guns, a tunnel exit, or supply pods. You just can't end your movement in these spaces. Now, I've gone ahead and removed a stalagmite, and I'll put it back in a second, but I wanted to show you that when you're adjacent to a pickup token, which is a token that has one of these question marks on it, you're going to go ahead and flip it over. In this case, we got a loot bug token. It's a harmless creature with a giant appetite for minerals, which makes it an easy prey for us dwarves who are mining nearby, and we can use our pickaxe on it if we wish. Now, it's also worth mentioning on the pickup token, if you see a pickaxe symbol on it, it lets you know that you can be adjacent to it and interact with it with a pickaxe action and be able to collect it adjacent to it, or when you're on top of it. There will be pickup tokens where that pickaxe is not shown, and in those situations, you have to be on the space to collect whatever's there. When you choose to use your pickaxe, you roll a white die, and you'll notice on the die it will depict icons like a pickaxe. You might find a blank, you might find a single pickaxe like this one, or a double pickaxe, and what this represents is how many successful chops you performed with the pickaxe during this action, and then you can actually take each of these symbols, which equals a hit, and use a hit to be spent to carry out any of the pickaxe actions you'd like mining, farming, self-defense, landscaping, or interior design. Using the pickaxe action, this is called farming the loot bug, and when you do it, you get a gold for doing so. You also roll the mineral die where we have a chance to find gold or nitra. There's also blank sides as well, so we might find nothing in addition to the gold here, but let's hope for something good. We got ourselves a nitra. Nitra is a great resource to find, and the reason is because if you have 3 of these crimson red type of ore, you can spend 3 nitra to call in a supply pod, which can be a real life lifesaver when your team is low on health and ammo. And luckily for us, not only are we gaining this Nitra, we also have 2 Nitra which are visible in the scenario. So you can see down here below we have 2 other Nitras which we can potentially go for in the future. What we just gained off the loot bug, with the loot bug token now removed and the mineral dye taken away, we gain a gold and a Nitra. This can go inside of our storage area for both of them. Now let's talk about what makes the Driller special, and the first thing is close combat. You ignore any resistance against pickaxe. In other words, when the Driller's up close and personal, if the pickaxe is used and it's against a hostile creature, if that hostile creature has a resistance, which would be noted on its reference board to the left of the major board, which I set up and talked about earlier on, then that resistance would be ignored. The thing is, in this scenario being an introductory one, we only have grunt insectoids out in the world right now, and they have 0 resistance across any types of attacks, no matter what you have. So this isn't going to have anything to do with things at the moment, but could certainly come into play in the future. And the one down below is a big one for the Driller. It's the major skill and gear ability for this character. It's called the Power Drill, and it's the Driller's able to destroy wall spaces and stalagmites automatically while he's on the move. So as soon as you destroy an obstacle, you remove it from the map. Your move action has to end on its space. You don't roll the mineral die when you destroy a stalagmite, and anything and everything inside of it gets pulverized by your dual mammoths, and you're unable to drill into walls containing minerals. Now, this type of ability is a chosen thing. And actually at the very beginning of the game, as you saw, I moved 2 spaces out of the 3 movement I had. With the 3rd movement, I could have landed on the stalagmite. So I could have gone from where I was at the beginning, 1, 2, and right on top of the stalagmite. It would have ended my movement right there, which would have been fine because that's 3 movement. It wouldn't have wasted any. That would have been a complete stop. But how the stalagmite is resolved would change. As it mentions, I would not be rolling for any minerals off the stalagmite because I'm aggressively just powering through it. However, if I stop adjacent to it and I try to clear it with my pickaxe in the future, then I'm able to roll the mineral die and potentially get something out of it. So the question really becomes, are you trying to get through things? Are you trying to knock it down because maybe you need line of sight to make attacks? There's a number of different factors as to why you may or may not want to take out a stalagmite. And of course you have walls, and walls are basically anything that's a ridge against any of these dark spaces, because I can, as the Driller, start drilling out into these areas. And of course, even the other dwarves in play can do such things, but the Driller has the ability to innately do this very easily as it's moving. So with my 3rd action, what I'm looking at doing here is using my primary weapon, the flamethrower. From where I'm at, I want to draw line of sight, and when you draw line of sight, you can draw from anywhere inside the hex to anywhere in the hex where the enemy is you're targeting. So in this case, I could be drawing a line from here to here, and as you can see, no matter where, I can easily hit this individual in the stalagmite that's here, does not get in the way. Even if I was to draw line of sight from where I am to this one, I can still do it on other spots without it going through the stalagmite, so that's okay. But if I wanted to try to hit this one, well, the stalagmite is going to block line of sight. For my 3rd action, I know I'm using my flamethrower to make an attack, so we're going to take away 1 primary ammo. In order to do that, I have a choice between 2 different options, Fire Haze and Flaming Ground. This is 3 yellow dice at range 3, or 2 yellow dice for Flaming Ground at range 3. You'll also notice there's 3 flame tokens, so we have to place those out on the ground, as the ground around the target will ignite with flames after using that particular attack. Also, if you're wondering what these recessed areas are down below, they are for weapon upgrade slots. So yes, you can actually increase your weapon beyond the capabilities of what it is by default. You can also do this with your secondary weapon too, if it has the available slots. So we're doing that flame ground attack, and for where I'm currently standing, I can draw a line of sight easily 3 spaces away down to this area right here. Again, line of sight is just a straight line from hex to the hex you're targeting, and we are able to do it because we're within range. So we're going to roll 2 dice and see what we get for our attack. And of course, after this happens, I will show you how the flaming ground effect impacts things as well. Again, one thing to mention, these are grunts. They only need 1 hit to kill them. They are the easiest thing in the game to kill off. Things escalate for other enemies as you go along. So right off the bat, we got some serious hits. Now we know our target is right here, but once we've rolled our dice, we decide which die we want to use on that space. In this case, whichever one we use doesn't matter because we only need 1 hit to kill these things anyway. So we'll go ahead and use this one here to kill off that one. Now that we've rolled our dice, we get to assign dice to a targeted space. So the space we initially targeted was this one here. So we assign one of these dice to that space, regardless of which one we choose. It's going to kill that thing off because it only needs 1 hit to die. So we'll go ahead and take this double hit here, place it right there. there, that thing is dead. At this point, we now assign our second die, and just so you're aware, if we had an enemy that was here, let's say that was actually 3 hit points to kill, then we would be able to go ahead and put this with this die in order to kill off the targeted area. So it's not that we're dividing up our dice and spreading them everywhere, it's that we're going to use the dice and allocate them in a way that makes a lot of sense. So in this case, it's going to hit this space. The second die doesn't need to go to this space. We're going to allocate it for this one right here. This is a flamethrower, so thematically this makes perfect sense, and we're going to kill off the second one. Now, because we used the flaming ground attack, the space we targeted when we rolled our dice is a space that ignites first. So we have fire in that space. Now, let's say hypothetically we had a really big enemy that was beyond 1 HP sitting in here. This fire would then ignite in an adjacent space if that thing was still alive. What happens now is the 2 other fire tokens that are going to come into play, because there was a total of 3, are going to be placed in adjacent spaces branching off from the initial one. So the ground has ignited in flames, which has created a nice little wall of protection for myself, at least on that side of the equation, although the grunt could potentially go around north and get me. But for now, that's pretty good. You might be wondering also, why didn't you place the flame here and then maybe go right into that space as well? Well, you can place it here for this one. I could have placed it over here, but this third one has to go in a clear or empty space. It cannot go into a space with an enemy already in there. So my dwarf has now taken 3 actions, and if we were playing with other players around the game table, or if you were controlling other dwarves in solo mode, then you would go ahead right now and go to the event phase, drawing an event card. But because we're playing true solo, Bosco, the bot, is going to activate right after my dwarf before the event card is pulled. Bosco is a useful sidekick because it cannot be attacked by creatures, it never runs out of ammo, Bosco does not block movement or line of sight, and can't pick up minerals or tokens. However, it can be used to dig out of hidden caves and reveal the creatures inside of them. And if it's within range, Bosco can also provide combat support using reaction attacks just like any other dwarf. Now, we move into what we can do with Bosco here. So after we've taken our 3 actions with our dwarf like we have, and just before we draw an event card, Bosco is going to carry out 2 actions, and these are the available things it can do. It can move, allowing Bosco to go up to 3 spaces, and Bosco's a flying robot, so I can ignore deep pits completely. I can ignore dwarves and stalagmites, however, I cannot end movement on them, but this thing can get around quite quickly. Another thing I can choose to do as an action is pickaxe. You can use Bosco's pickaxe on adjacent walls, stalagmites, loot bugs, or creatures. Any minerals it finds fall to the ground, and a dwarf has to manually collect them. Now, the other thing I can do is a machine gun attack, so I can roll 1 bullet die at a range 3 space away. So good on the attack side of things, it can help there. It also has a rocket launcher where you can roll 1 explosive die at a range 4 spaces away. And it mentions that activating the rocket launcher uses up both of Bosco's actions. So it's such a powerful attack that it counts for both actions you can do on its activation. For my first action with Bosco, it's going 3 spaces to the east. I'm going to have Bosco go ahead and do a pickaxe action on the stalagmite right next to it, which is called Interior Design. Let's see if Bosco's pickaxe action is going to be successful, and we can go after the stalagmite. Yes, indeed. Which means we're simply going to remove the stalagmite, roll a mineral die, and because it's Bosco doing this, the mineral, if we even get one off the mineral die, will drop in that space. The dwarf will have to go over to get it if it wants it, or I can just leave it there. So with that stalagmite taken care of, let's see if we find anything there, and we do, just barely. It flips over. It looks like it's going to be the same one as we found last time. It appears to be a cave full of nitra, which is pretty awesome. So, I mean, it might be worth to take out the stalagmite that's in front of us and see if we get a third one, which would give us 3 total to be able to get that supply drop whenever we need it. We now move on to the event phase. We've drawn from the top of the deck, and the very first card we got is a mission-specific event card. So this is going to be a default card, which you'll find inside the event deck, which is going to relate back to the mission book, where there are specific mission events that are going to take place. We're going to play that out right now. For this mission, it is called a grunt nest, and we're placing a grunt at each tunnel exit. Now, there are a number of different types of event cards we can run into, and some of these event cards will have activations on them where we'll either be moving or being attacked by the enemies that are inside the caves. In this case, it was a mission-specific one, so we just have enemies pouring through the tunnel exits based on this scenario. So not bad for now, but of course, being overwhelmed by this can be pretty tough. They can be simplistic to kill, but in great numbers, they can become quite a problem. Now, something else that I didn't mention, which is worth mentioning now that we're talking about being overwhelmed, is Bosco in the solo mode has an additional action it can do for reviving. So if a dwarf becomes unconscious, and that happens when it does, it's going to have the threat meter moving up the track, and of course that's one of the ways in which this thing can move up. And as it moves up the track, it's going to hit certain swarm location spots, which will have us drawing swarm cards from the top left hand corner there, which are beside the event deck, adding even more insanity into the fray. So you're really not trying to pump that up quickly, but in those cases your dwarf might go down and Bosco can actually come over and revive you regardless of how far away you are. So Bosco is really handy that way. It allows you to stand your dwarf back up, you get 1 health, and then immediately carry out your turn, but you do not draw an event card first. Your buddy, though, is then destroyed and you return the Bosco token to the box. So it is a one-time revive and then the bot is gone for good. We're heading into our second round of play, and I want to quickly talk about hypothetically what would have happened if activation had have occurred instead of spawning. So let's pretend that the spawning never occurred and these two did not come into the fray. This one was activating. Now, if the stalagmite was still here, which it is not, but if it had been here, the shortest path for this individual to get to my dwarf, because that's all it targets, it doesn't care about the bot Bosco, would have been this way, and it would have gone right through the flames, hit this flame here, and when it did, that would assign it 1 damage, the flame would be removed, and that thing would be dead, which is what my plan originally was. But I got a little greedy, and Bosco went after my dwarf, and after he put down that nice flame wall, and I said, well, let's move over here, and instead of attacking this thing, let's go ahead and try to take out a stalagmite and get some stuff that my dwarf can kind of swing by and grab later on. Now, doing this kind of broke up my original plan of building a barrier here, because if this activated, it would certainly be smart enough to go the opposite way around. The good news is an activation is a choice between movement or attack for the enemies. So worst case, this thing would have just come around the corner here and sat. It wouldn't have attacked me, so I wouldn't have taken on any damage. But as you can see in great numbers, or if you start getting pinned into areas, it can become really problematic very fast. So now as we begin our second round officially, we're going to go ahead and take back all the flaming tokens from the flaming ground attack from the previous round. The driller is also going to choose to move, moving 2 spaces to land right on top of the nitro, which I've collected. I'm not going to place inside of my storage area. Now it's worth mentioning, inside of this I have 2 nitra and a gold. When I was telling you earlier that you need to have 3 nitra in order to bring in a supply pod, that is correct. That's the typical way, but you can also substitute gold for nitra. So as of right now, I can bring a supply pod in, and that's going to be useful when I need health and additional ammo in the future. At this point, my main objective in my head is to head right for the Morkite, because that's what I'm trying to get. But at the same time, I also want to uncover these tokens to try to find the flower, the Apoca flower that I'm trying to find. I need both of these resources in order to achieve my victory. So we're going to head in that direction for now. So we're going to move 2 spaces to land right on top of the token. Check it out, I've got my very first Apoca Bloom, and I need 3 total to be successful at that objective, and then I need 5 Morkite. Now there are 3 more tokens in play, so 2 of them have Apoca Blooms. Got to just figure out where they're at. For my third and final action with my dwarf, I'm going to use Fire Haze, which is the other attack, which I haven't used before. It gives me more dice, 3 dice this time. They're all yellow in order to try and take out this grunt. Should be quite easy. I also placed the Apoca Bloom inside of my reserve area, and oh, look at that. We got exactly what we need. That's all we need. We don't even need to assign any dice beyond that. So we're assigning 1 die to the grunt, and that grunt is gone. At this point, we're going to activate Bosco, who's going to make a machine gun attack using a bullet die against this grunt right here within range. Bosco's range is 3, so easily within and nothing blocking its line of sight. A green die is the bullet die. Let's see what we get, and we got the 1 hit we need. That thing is dead. Now the interesting question that I have here for myself is taking a look way down here. We have another token. I mean, it might be an Apoca Bloom way down here. It certainly could be possible. There is one over here, which we're kind of heading in that direction. I think for now we'll kind of head east because there's a ton of Morkite over there, and there's still a token over there. Maybe we'll come back the other way. Again, remember, these black spaces, we can just start digging into them. They are basically considered still part of the scenario. So don't look at the scenario as being just what's visible. What is not visible is able to be dug through. So seeing as we're heading in this direction, I'm going to have Bosco go right up against the wall. That's the second action. That is the most I can do. We're going to stop right there and grab an event card. This event card says they're closing in. Increase swarm threat by 1, and if this doesn't trigger a swarm, activate all the creatures. So this is going to see our threat level going up by 1. We did not activate a swarm. This would be a swarm activation. So because of this, all the creatures in play are now activating. So looking at the reference card here, you can quickly see the movement, the range, and the damage value for particular enemies. Again, we only have to deal with grunts currently. So right now, 1 hit point, they can attack from range 1, which means there's no way the one in play can do anything to us. So it needs to move. And again, when it activates, it has to choose to move or attack. So it needs to move. So what's going to happen right now is this grunt right here is going to move 3, so 1, 2, 3, ending its space inside the deep pit. Now you might be wondering, well, how do these creatures traverse these deep pits? Well, in this case, these creatures can be thought of just like the video game as crawling along the walls of these pits. So basically, in this situation with a very small tile of deep pit, which is just 2, well, it can pretty much do circles in here nonstop and bounce between these hexes as much as it wants to. But on a bigger deep pit like this, it's not going to move straight through the larger areas of the deep pit. It's going to stick to the walls in order to get around the deep pit. So we now begin another round of play, and at this point, the dwarf really wants to use his drilling skills to get himself from one area to another. He's going to drill to make that happen. So my driller is going to go ahead and make a move action from here into here and drill that area in the center. And at this point, my movement stopped. I also placed a single tile in the middle to show and represent that it's been drilled through and the passageway has been connected. For my second action, I'm going to move 2 in order to get right adjacent to not only the token, but also the Morkite space, which is a great advantage for me because I can flip over the token and at least see what it is. And I've revealed another Apoca Bloom. Now, I can't pick this up right now. I need to be in the same space with it to do that, but at least I know it's right there. What I want to do with my last action is mine, because I want that Morkite, which is just to the north of me. So as we're taking our pickaxe action, let's go ahead and roll our white die and see how many successful hits we get here. We got 1, which is what we need in order to do what we want, which is mining. And we are going to now whack the wall and collect the reward, in this case, Morkite. Not bad at all. So we got ourselves 1 Morkite. We already have an Apoca Bloom. We know where another Apoca Bloom is, so we're well on our way to completing our objectives. Now, just before we go ahead with activating Bosco again, I want to talk about the pickaxe action, because inside of it, there are 5 different, uniquely different things that you can use those white die icons on, those pickaxes. You can use it to mine, like I just did now, to gather a resource out of the wall, which was nice. You can farm with it, so you can harvest a loot bug, as you saw earlier in the video. You can get red sugar or an alien egg on your space or an adjacent space. You can use it for self-defense. So in other words, instead of using your primary weapon or your secondary weapon, you can actually use your pickaxe against an enemy to attack it on an adjacent space. It's worth mentioning, when you roll it, if you happen to get a double pickaxe, you actually can split up those different hits across different enemies, because it's a melee attack versus your primary and secondary weapons, which are more focused on long-range attacks or just being a ranged weapon in general. And then, of course, we have landscaping, which you can dig out a passage by destroying a wall adjacent to your space. Now, this is worth highlighting because, well, I can do that as a driller. I can choose to use the landscaping icon within the pickaxe action in order to make kind of a passageway, or I can do what the driller innately does, which is just move through the passageway and create that as well. So the driller is already capable innately of just moving and destroying walls or stalagmites as part of its innate abilities. Other dwarves will need to use the pickaxe action landscaping in order to dig through the walls. So that's where that one comes in. And then interior design's another one where you can destroy a stalagmite. You actually saw Bosco do this earlier on, so you can do it as a dwarf as well, and it has to be adjacent to your space too. So Bosco's going to go ahead and attempt to try and pickaxe this thing in order to get some resources off of it, and fails. I tried to move back actually a couple spaces west, which is kind of away from where I originally planned to take Bosco, and he tried to take out the stalagmite and was unable to do so. The next event card off the top of the deck is Creature Pileup. It says place this card on top of the Swarm deck. I don't like this. It says when the next Swarm card activates, discard this card and draw 2 Swarm cards instead of 1, placing all creatures from both cards before activating them. That, my friends, is a very, very nasty one. Doubling things up kind of gives me some vibes of Zombicide, where you used to have those double activations come in. Those were painful, so absolutely something to be a little terrified when the first Swarm card gets pulled. Now remember, we're playing in a very introductory scenario here, so as of right now, enemies are going easy on us. We haven't had any swarm cards yet. Things are going to ramp up real quick, but you can see based on how things are structured in this, it's going to get really interesting, being that the pod to escape later, even though the Morkite is all conveniently placed, well, a good chunk of it anyway, in the back corner over here, these exits are going to be problematic. If they keep spawning a bunch of enemies and they keep kind of collecting in this area, if I get out of here and it takes me some time to get out of there after multiple turns, there could be a real problem getting through whatever swarm has built up over here back to the pod in order to actually win. So what appears to be kind of smooth sailing right now can very much change as the game goes on. Heading into the next round of play here, the driller is going to have to work his way around this deep pit because, well, the driller doesn't have the tools necessary to get through the pit as easily as the scout would. For instance, if I was using the scout, I would have the ability to do things like move over a pit or creatures using my grappling hook. Each of these different dwarves have different really powerful abilities that make them unique and add strategic advantages for you. Again, if you're playing solo, you can choose to control 4 of them, and then you have all of them at your disposal, but of course you have a lot more characters to manage, but it can get pretty wild with all the combinations between them and what they can work together as a team to accomplish. The engineer, for instance, can actually place platforms with unlimited range, allowing you to get around real nicely. And the gunner actually has the ability to use zip lines, but can also place shield tokens, which can help you out too. So we'll drill through that wall for one action. We'll drill through another wall for a second action. And I'm sure you know what I want to do here. We're going to use a pickaxe action to try to see if we can actually mine some stuff here. So we'll roll to see how many we get. We got 2. Well, in this case, we're going to be using 1 as that's the only thing around us that's really worth doing. I don't think there'll be anything else we'll do, but we're certainly going to go ahead and mine that Morkite in the space adjacent to us. And using that last action after mining up the Morkite, I used it in order to break down a wall in an adjacent space, which now connects things for me. Heading over to Bosco's turn, I'm sure you guys know what I'm going to try to do up here. Let's try and take out that stalagmite. Maybe we'll come by later on and grab it. Oh, blank. So another miss attempt on that one. Let's go for another one, see if we can land it. Yes, finally. All right, Bosco, what did you find underneath that stalagmite? We got absolutely nothing for all of that work. Now, something worth mentioning is this rock and stone card right here. This card sits on the right-hand side of the dashboard and is thought of as a one-shot card you can use. So basically use it and then it's discarded and gone. So this one says, if you don't rock and stone, you ain't coming home. And it allows me to re-roll one of those pickaxe dice if I wish. Now, I haven't done this, even though I could have absolutely used it during my multiple attempts to try to take out that stalagmite. But because it wasn't wasting my driller's turn, and of course the actual grunts aren't a threat against Bosco, I didn't find it to be a great time to use it yet. When my dwarf gets into trouble, maybe needs to use it, and I want it to land, then I'll probably be using it for the dwarf. And from a solo perspective, something else worth mentioning is certain cards might tell you that they can affect other dwarves. When you're playing solo, you can take those cards, which are talking about affecting others, as being able to be used to affect yourself as well. All right, we got another one which is going to increase the threat track. This is getting bad. See, I was telling you about things looking easy on one side of the game board and about to probably get aggressive later on. It says increase the swarm threat by 1, putting us 1 away from a swarm card pull, which is not good. And if it didn't trigger a swarm, which it didn't, we're going to activate the creatures. So that one is going to head 3 towards the dwarf. Just like that, we're done another round. We can head into the next one. My dwarf is going to keep on working at that Morkite while things are quiet. So we're going to do a move action here and get in the most advantageous position I can possibly get in, right in that corner. And just as I was telling you about that rock and stone reroll that I have, that is going to potentially come in handy here if I really don't like what I get off a roll. So for our next action, we're doing a pickaxe action. We're rolling the white die to see how many activations we get. Hopefully a lot. That is bad. So let's not waste time. Let's actually go ahead and use this to re-roll this and hopefully get something better than a blank. That's a little better. We'll go ahead and take the Morkite, which is right adjacent to us. All right, I got one more action to go. Might as well keep on mining around here. So let's use a pickaxe action and see if we get lucky and get 2. We can grab this gold. No. Okay, so we can just pick up 1 of the gold for now. Moving over to Bosco. I don't think Bosco's a big fan of seeing a grunt go crawling around behind him, heading towards the dwarf. It's going to spin around. We're going to make a machine gun attack at this thing, rolling 1 bullet die. Rolling the bullet die right now, see what we get. And that is the 1 bullet we need. That thing is dead. Now, as I talked about at the beginning of the video when we were setting up, I've only started this scenario on the 2nd level of difficulty. You can pump it up to the 5th level. And of course, when you do that, the swarm would have already hit by now. And of course, there would have already been additional enemies added in from the beginning of the game, making this scenario even tougher. So we're playing this at a learning pace, but you can really ramp things up. One thing which I just caught, which has no gameplay impact whatsoever, thankfully because I caught it early enough, is that I've already made 2 attacks with the flamethrower and I forgot to spend my ammo token. Make sure you do that every time you make an attack. You might miss that the first couple times you play the game. It is easy to miss, but you want to make sure you're accurate on that because this is really going to let you know when you need to pull that supply drop and have it land so you can replenish your ammo. Now, it's kind of a tough call for a second action for Bosco because where he's currently positioned is actually pretty good, because if I move him any further south to maybe go over here and start mining up these stalagmites and taking them out, the downside of that is he's not going to be able to protect anything that comes in here and starts heading right down the corridor at me, and we kind of have a ways to work ourselves back out again. So I kind of want to keep him somewhat close by, but also keep him around for protection. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just move him here so he's got enough range to do damage across. He can hit from 3 away, so not bad over to here, dealing with anything coming from this exit. And then it still keeps him in line with being able to hit anything kind of crawling its way towards the entrance. All right, that should be good enough. And at this point, we're going to go to the event deck and find out what pain is coming our way. We got the mission-specific event. This is the first one we got when we started off our scenario, so it's going to see those 2 exits have some enemies come in. So a smart move on my part to keep him kind of in the middle of both and also covering that entryway into where I'm currently at. All right, beginning off a brand new turn here, we're going to go ahead and have our individual move 1, which is not a great usage of movement, but at least I'll be in a position to maybe if I get a double on a pickaxe action, I'll be able to get both of these. Let's see if the die is in my favor here, and it is just barely. That almost was a blank. At least I got the 1, so that's going to give me the Morkite because that's the one I want to go after for sure. We now currently have 4 Morkite. We only need 1 more. I'm going to stretch for it. I'm going to try and see if I can pick this gold up. Let's see how we do with our last action here in the mines. Let's see if the pickaxe works for us. It does. We get the last gold down this corner. At this point, I'm just going to have Bosco move up 1 position here and make a 3 ranged attack against this one. Let's see if we can thin the herd a little bit for our dwarf as he makes his way back. And we do. This thing has been killed off, so that's great news. This is really nuts because I've played this multiple times off camera already, and I'm pretty surprised I've gotten a number of these in a row like this. There's a bunch of other types of event cards in there, but these are really starting to stack up because at this point now we are increasing the swarm threat by 1, and it is going to activate the swarm. And remember, we had that creature pileup occur on the swarm deck, which means we're going to be resolving 2 cards worth, which should be a whole lot of fun. All right, so normally you pull 1 swarm card. We're pulling 2 because of the creature pileup. As I've said, we're going to flip both of these, see what they are, and then we're going to actually deploy all of them into the game. And then, as it states, we're going to activate them after they're all spawned in from both cards. A lot of fun. So let's see what we got here. We got Web Spinner. So place 1 Web Spinner at exit 2 and 2 grunts each at exits 1 and 3. Well, thankfully we don't have 3, so a little less there, but that sounds pretty bad. And then on top of it, Slash and Smash. Place 1 Slasher at exit 1 and 2 grunts each at exits 2 and 3. And we're activating, of course, everything that gets spawned in here. I told you guys this is going to go from 0 to 100 real fast. So at this particular point, here is what it looks like overall on the game board. It's about to get a bit more busy. If you're familiar with the video game, this is a very accurate depiction as to how things will just go from, well, they're pretty quiet, there's not much really going on, you're finding the odd one, and then all of a sudden there is just an absolute hive swarm coming at you from all angles, and you're going to have a lot of work to do. And that's exactly what we have here. Now, we have a bunch of grunts, so it looks a little more dangerous than it might be, but we do have a couple new individuals that have joined in here. The Web Spitter is brand new, and the Slasher. And the Slasher actually brings in some resistances against pickaxe, bullets, and fire, which is going to make that one quite a bit more fun to try and take down. And that's the one that is way up here in the top. So activations occur based on the reference board I have off to the left. So the grunts are first, then the web spitters, then the exploders, then you have the spawns, and then you have the slashers. So we're starting with the grunts, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they're going to be moving towards the dwarf. So we're going to go ahead and start using their movement, which they have a movement of 3, in order to get them as close to the dwarf as possible. So the grunts are on their way. They've all moved their 3 movement. It's worth mentioning they can traverse through each other as they're trying to make their way towards the dwarf, but of course they have to stop in an empty space in order to end their movement. Now we're going to talk about the other 2 individuals that came in. Now going through the reference sheet, which is to the left of the game board currently, the grunts being at the top. The next one's the web spitter, which is right here. This thing comes in, it needs 2 damage to kill it, and has a range of 5 when it makes attacks, which is pretty long distance and can be a big problem if it's in the back, and then it moves 3. So it's just as fast as the grunts, but has crazy range. So this thing's going to move 3 now, and because it can't really get, using its effective movement, it can't try and take the shortest route because there is actually a grunt here, it'll just go here. So it's going to try to go wherever it can to try to make its way through. And of course, if stalagmites were like completely blocking its path, it would move as far as it can and then just end its movement. And then way up there for the slasher is going to be moving at 3 as well, coming right through the grunt to the opposite side. Bosco certainly feels a little outnumbered at this point in time, and I also kind of feel bad that I left the Apoca Bloom back there because that's the only thing I need to go back and get objective-wise. Otherwise, I could have started working my way by drilling myself back here and kind of taking them in a big circle, but I still need this token over here. This is a really interesting strategic decision here because I could work my way backwards right now, and I think I'm fairly confident I could work my way through these ones here and kill them off, and the next set would come and I'd be able to work through them. Or I could kind of play chicken with them and actually build out this way and maybe just delay connecting it so that these continue to run around the long way, and maybe have Bosco over here just kind of take pot shots to thin the herd and then kind of connect in here and then, try to get around in here. This could be interesting. I'm going to give it a shot. We're going to head around this way. I don't know if this is going to be a wise decision or not, but I'm going to go for it. And then later, we always have this nice connection through here. A quick drill could get me over there to the flower. Again, or the bloom. I don't know if this is going to pan out the way I hope it might, but we can give it a shot. This is really risky because even though this kind of seems like a wise idea, these grunts and stuff are going to try to take the shortest route to come get me. So I got to keep that in mind as well. Like, it's not like they're going to go around the pit. They're going to actually use the walls as best they can to kind of come around. So this is risky because I'm also not thinning the herd by taking these actions. So then similar event cards that might come out in the future could add more to this pile. It could be really problematic. But right now, Bosco is able to go. I'm going to take some pot shots at some of these grunt ones to see if we can kill some. So let's go ahead and see if we can thin out maybe even the ones that are going to come at us first based on our plan. So we'll go ahead and roll a bullet die right now. We'll attack this first one right here, hoping for at least a hit. And we get it. So that one is out of here. That's good news. And then we're going to roll for the next one because we can hit from 3 away again. Machine gun is okay. It's only the big giant. Oh, perfect. It's only the big attack that Bosco has that takes up both actions. So at least we thinned that down. We just have to deal with the slasher now, so not as bad. This sounds pretty bad. How about a collapsing floor? It says the floor gives way below you. We're going to roll 2 of these black dice, which we haven't seen rolled before. Typically, you roll these when an enemy is making an attack against you. We haven't been attacked by an enemy yet because we've done a good job of mitigating things. That's probably going to change real quick. The collapsing floor is going to have us roll these. We're ignoring any of these nasty bite icons. The exclamation marks are the ones that we do not want to see because if we do, we are going to be knocked over. What's really bad about being knocked over is your miniature falls to its side. You cannot carry out any actions until you get back up. You have to burn 2 actions just to stand back up again, or if you're assisted by another dwarf, of course, for 1 action, but I'm not using the other dwarfs in this solo mode just by myself, so I'd have to burn 2 full actions. Not probably the best. Let's go ahead and roll and see how this works out. Hopefully it's not too bad. Oh my gosh, we are definitely knocked over. So that collapsing floor totally knocked us over. And then it also says you accidentally uncover a piece of loot gear in a cave pocket below you based on this collapsing floor. So we get to take a random upgrade token. Here's a look at the weapon upgrade tokens, all face down, shuffle them around. We're gonna grab one at random here. Let's go for this one right on the edge. Oh, we got ourselves a plus red die. That could be really nice. Well, I'm pretty happy about this because after rolling for your regular attack with a flamethrower now, because I've attached this to my flamethrower, I can now roll a red die for extra explosive damage. It's worth mentioning I haven't used my jury-rigged boomstick yet, but I plan to in the future just to show you how that operates. You'll also see there's an upgrade space on that one too, so I could have chosen to put it on this as well. We're starting a brand new round. We're going to have ourselves stand back up on our feet. We're going to spend 2 actions to do it. With the last action, I am not going to connect with the landscape again because, well, no activation occurred, so there was no movement, so my plan kind of is a little stalled at the moment. So that's going to be it for the driller. We stood up for 2, we moved another one, and we're able to drill through a wall to do it. And now Bosco's going to go ahead and make some attacks on those grunts up front. So we're just going to make some shots here with the green die. Hopefully I can land some kills and just, again, thin this herd. I might just connect on the next one if we can actually do quite a bit of damage here. Yes, that'll be 1 hit and a blank and another. So let's go ahead and kill off this one here. I want to say, well, actually, let's take this one right here. It really appears the longer I go on with this plan, the worse it gets. We have a Cave Leech attack happening, and this is going to be an attack from above. Dwarves within attack range of our space that we're currently in receive a free reaction attack against it. 1 hit needed. Again, this doesn't apply because we don't have other dwarves in play currently, but if you did play that solo with all 4 dwarves, well, that would be really bad. If it survives, you roll 2 black dice and suffer any damage as usual. If you roll an exclamation mark, you become knocked over again. Well, I said I was going to use my secondary weapon soon, and this is probably a good time to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 of my ammo for my secondary attack because this is a reaction attack I have to do in order to try to get 1 hit. That's all I need in order to make this happen. So with this particular weapon, we've got 2 dice. I basically take whichever result I want out of the 2. So we're going to go ahead and roll. This only has 1 blank side on each die, which makes it a better die to roll than these ones, which only have, or I should say, which have 2 blank sides on them. So odds-wise, I guess, a little better maybe with these ones. So we'll go with it, and we are A-okay. So that is not going to affect us. We're not knocked over. We've dealt with the Cave Leech with just 1 of those. I'm going to continue to bide my time here because I don't want to hook up just yet and then be out of range of this thing and have it be able to turn around and just take pot shots at me and then have all its friends come right up to my grill may not be the best. So even though this has changed in terms of my plan a few times, I'm going to continue kind of ripping through the ground around the outside. That's going to be it for my driller. And then over here, we're going to have some grunt attacks here with the die. See if I can do some damage. It's perfect where where Bosco is currently sitting. So first attacks on this one right here, and it is a miss. We'll do another attack here. Come on. Yes. So we at least thin that one down by 1. So Bosco's doing a good job of crowd control. We've come across the event card Starch Nuts. It says you come across several delicious starch nuts. What a find. However, taking time to collect them all might disturb the local wildlife. We have an optional thing below. If we're not downed at the moment, we can draw 2 rock and stone cards and then increase the swarm threat by 1. This is really tempting because I don't have a card in that slot at the moment. Would be nice to get 1, and being able to draw 2 is pretty cool, so I think I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and pay the cost in order to do what I just did. This card will disappear, and we're going to take a look at the 2 cards that I just got from the Rock and Stone deck. We have, I think we might actually get out of this alive, distribute up to 2 health from the general supply to other dwarves. Again, when you're playing solo, you can actually do this for yourself. I haven't been hit yet, so this could be really nice to actually have this. And the other one says we're rich. We can add a gold to an empty wall space. If we want to be greedy on the resource side of things, we could do that too. I'm actually going to go with that. We now head into the next round of play here, and I'm looking at getting close to some resources. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and they're going to mine this one right here. Let's see how we do. Can we get what we want? Yes, we can. So this is going to be collected and added to our pool. So one thing I want to point out is there's a lot of you that probably were looking at where Bosco is currently sitting and going, why aren't you throwing damage on this really nasty slasher right here? Because this corner could absolutely draw a line to the top corner over here and you could make that attack. Well, guess what? The slasher has resistance of 1 towards this die, and this die only gives 1 as its best result. So whatever I roll on that from Bosco is going to do literally nothing. But what I do have in my back pocket for Bosco is that stronger attack. So Bosco is targeting the slasher with its rocket launcher. Let's see if we get a double icon result off the explosion die, and we do. It rolls right around to 2 icons. What a perfect hit. That thing is gone. Now, typically when you use the red die, you're using an explosive type attack, like a rocket launcher from Bosco. But in most cases, it's like a throwable card or something. And I have a throwable, but it's an electrocution grenade. It uses a green die. But if it was like a regular frag grenade or something along those lines, you'd actually be able to hit a certain radius or area of effect and be able to affect multiple targeted spots. But Bosco is just shooting a rocket straight at the enemy. So in terms of using the red die, there's 2 icons on this side. Some of them have 1. And there's another one here for scare, which is a line with an icon. So basically it doesn't do any damage, it just scares and moves the enemies to a different area. We've got ourselves a mission specific event again, so we're going to have another grunt here and another grunt over there. Starting off a new round, the driller's going to move into this space and drill it away as well. I'm going to use the Rock and Stone card, We're Rich, to add 1 gold to any empty wall space. So in this place, we're going to place it right here. So we can go ahead right now with a pickaxe action. And if I get really lucky, I can not only take, well, I'm hoping to take both resources that are here. One is right beside me, kind of hidden away. So let's go ahead and roll, see if we get 2 pickaxes, if we're really lucky. And we do get 2. That's awesome. So that worked out perfect. Both of those going in the bucket. It looks like it pays off sometimes to be greedy. Now I've been waiting to use this, and because we've now connected into this other chamber here, I can actually throw this. It's called a throwable. This is going to be my third action. I'm going to chuck this thing in an arc. The only thing that stops using throwables are walls. So in other words, you can't chuck things through, well, the black areas of space, but you can chuck things over objects or whatever because you're throwing them in an arc kind of formation, of course, up in the air. So I can chuck this into this area. It's only range 4, so I just got to pick where I want it to land. I can even say it's looking to land right on top of this thing, so it maybe affects this one as well. You can see the actual area of effect right there, so it'll hit here, here, and then whichever other one, doesn't matter, there's nothing there. We're going to roll a green die, apply it to each target inside the blast radius, so hopefully we'll get a hit off of each of them there. And then regardless, they're also going to become, well, there's a negative condition associated with this too. So let's just see if we do the damage first. We do. So we're going to do some killing and some damaging. Now this thing right here takes 2 damage to kill. So not enough, but we're getting there. So that electrocution grenade was a one-shot. Its card is now discarded. That thing killed off a grunt. It put 1 damage out of the 2 I need on the web spitter. It stunned the web spitter because it was actually left alive. A great round for the dwarf, and we are getting close to the last Morkite over here. We still have an Apoca-Bloom on the other side of the game board, but I'm feeling pretty confident. Now this is going to be great because Bosco is within 1, 2, 3, 4 range of this thing. So when Bosco activates right now, we're going to go ahead with a red die and see if we can get the explosive damage on this thing to kill it. So we're going to go ahead and roll the die. Come on, Bosco, can you finish it off? Absolutely. 2 hits right there. That thing's been killed. Looks like we can find good event cards too. It says, sweet spot, the walls around you are covered in gold and red sugar. Will you take the time to gather some? Optional. If you're not down, which I'm not, roll the white die. For each pickaxe symbol rolled, gain either 2 health or 1 gold, then increase the swarm threat by 1. You know what? Based on how things are going, I think that's okay. We're not too close to a swarm thing yet. And I think I can kind of keep things under control. I also like being a little bit greedy in this situation. It's kind of fun. And we're rolling. We got 2 pickaxes. It did roll off camera, which is ridiculous. And because this is so good, we can gain 2 health or 1 gold for each. So we're going to get 2 gold, which is awesome, for 1 threat increase. Absolutely worth it, in my opinion. Starting off a new round, we're going to move and drill into this space right here. We're going to do a pickaxe action to see if we can mine this last Morkite right here, and we absolutely can. So we got exactly what we need. We have every Morkite from the entire scenario, all 5, that completes one of the 2 objectives. Next, we're going to have the driller go ahead and do a pickaxe action right here on the stalagmite. We'll see what we get out of it. Ooh, a double hit. I can't make use of the other one, really. I guess I could... Oh, actually, no, I could just put another path out here. Might as well. We'll just build out another path on top of breaking down the stalagmite. Let's see what resource we get, if any, out of this. We got ourselves nothing at all. Bosco's going to flip around and take a shot here at this one. Let's see if we can kill it off. Absolutely. This one is dead. The next event says Vantage Point. You approach a sheer tower of rock. Being a good dwarf, you feel compelled to climb it and get a good view. If you're not down, then you can look at the top card of either the event or swarm deck. You may then choose whether or not to shuffle that deck. Either way, increase the swarm threat by 1. Okay, so at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be increasing that swarm threat, which is unfortunate, but we get to look at whichever of the decks we want to do. This is not an optional thing. So in this case, which one do we want to look at? Well, good question. Good question indeed. Let's take a... We're 1 away from a swarm event, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the top card of the swarm deck looks like. The swarm deck looks like. This one says, look up, place 1. Ooh, that's the Mactira spawn at exit 1 and 3 grunts at exit 2, so that would be pretty bad. Although it doesn't matter if it's spawning at 1 anyway, because it's really over in a section that is quite full of not too many pits or anything like that. So this actually may not be that bad, to be honest. I think I might actually just leave this because I can choose whether or not I want to shuffle it. So I'm going to leave it because I'm pretty confident we can probably take it. The only thing I need to focus on now is getting that last Apoca-Bloom over here. So I'm going to probably traverse this way and kind of come across here. I might have to kill this thing first because my friend Bosco is not really anywhere close to it. So let's go ahead and do some movement. So we're going to use our flamethrower here because, well, we can't use the jury-rigged boomstick. It needs range 2 and I'm not close enough, and I want to just kill this thing from a distance and keep on running as fast as I can, because if I'm min-maxing my movement, if I do another move action, I can go 1, 2 and build out that third one and sit right there, which would be perfect, and then move right into the Apoca-Bloom in the future. Now, one thing I want to mention on the jury-rigged boomstick is that how I explained it before was incorrect in terms of rolling these dice and picking which one you want to use. It's actually better than that. It's a range 2 attack. You roll 2 armor-piercing dice, that's what the blue ones are called, and you assign both. They may be split between adjacent targets, is what is the cool factor with them. But anyway, going back to our attack here against the grunt, we use the primary ammo. We're going to burn this thing alive with a fire haze, and we absolutely do. This thing is completely devastated, so it is gone. That's the second action, and now with our third action, we're going to move, going 1, 2, third action, stop, and we're going to go ahead and landscape that out. And when I say landscape, I actually mean drill, because landscape is something you get off of a pickaxe action. All right, so there we go. That is the end of the driller's turn. We have nothing for Bosco to do, so we're just going to basically just say, we're not doing anything else. We're going to grab an event card. We're on the doorstep of a swarm here, so we'll see how this goes. We got glowing walls. Place 1 gold in the wall closest to you. Well, that's convenient. It's literally perfect. If there are several walls are at an equal distance, choose one, and then increase the swarm threat by 1, of course. So we're going to get something that's good, and we're going to offset it with a swarm card. And we already know what it is because we were able to take a look at this. So look up, we have a Mactyrus spawn at exit 1 and 3, but we don't have 3, so ignore that. Grunts coming in at 2. Apologies on that, I read the card wrong. It actually is and 3 grunts at exit 2. I saw the word grunts and I was like, that's more than 1 for sure. So there is 3 coming in here. Of course, they're trying to pile themselves as close to the dwarf as possible, which is really unfortunate. And they're going to activate, which for the first time, they are going to actually hurt me because they're right behind me. And then we got this big thing up top here, this spawn. So no matter what enemy is activating, you're always going to take a look at this section right here on this reference card. I'll tell you exactly which die it's rolling. So in this case, the grunt is rolling 1 black die. If we roll an exclamation mark, no effect, but it will tell you if there's something special about it or some kind of weird negative condition that will happen. So this is coming our way. If we get the teeth, that's going to be damage. That's going to affect our health instantly, and that's exactly what happened. So that hit getting through is going to affect our health, dropping us down to 4. You can see how quickly, if you have enough of those grunts around you hitting you, I mean, you could lose some health pretty fast and by surprise. So if you get yourself caught up in a bad situation, it can become pretty bad real quick. All right, let's not mess around. Let's get moving. We can move for 3 to get right on top of that Apoca Bloom and pick it up. With 3 Apoca Blooms and 5 Morkite collected, we have all the objectives successfully gathered. At this point, the drop pod comes back, and we have it now to be able to get inside of. Any of these spaces are safe spaces. We do not have to get back to the drill position where that particular dwarf started in. Any of these would be fine. So that's what we're gunning for right now. We do have 2 more actions, so I am going to probably be beelining it towards that, regardless of whatever's going on. And that works out perfectly because even on activation, that nasty spawn up there in the top can move 3 or shoot range from 3. So I've got enough out of its grasp to have it just activate potentially, maybe move closer to me. It won't be able to attack me. I'm also just on the doorstep of the pod. I'm going to have Bosco turn around and just shoot a rocket straight at that thing to see if we can just take it down. Red die, hoping for 2 icons. Can we do it? Absolutely. That thing is dead, clearing the way for our victory. The next event card was a mission-specific event, so we have another grunt down here in the pile and 1 up top. And with our very first action, we're diving straight inside the pod and we're out of here. Now, technically, I could have also taken a look at this on the way out or maybe even grabbed the gold. Things were going relatively well. But again, I started on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of difficulty, so things can ramp up in this, as I've mentioned multiple times. You saw those swarms pop up. You even saw how these grunts can kind of just appear at the worst possible time. And I was lucky in that I was in a very small corridor where there wasn't a lot of other locations, or I should say land, kind of exposed, because they could have really gotten around me pretty quickly and caught up with me. If they had had any activations and that had been all drilled out or had been explored through, these things could have just come all around me and circled me. It could have been really bad. And those situations will occur and have occurred when I've played this, but hopefully now you've seen everything. At least you understand the flow of how this game operates. Couple things to mention here that are important. When the pod was on the opposite side, when we hadn't completed all of our objectives, the second we complete our objectives and the pod flips over, if there's any objects or creatures on those spaces, the drop pod basically comes down and crushes everything and kills everything underneath of it. So you can actually use that to your advantage at times, potentially, depending on where the drop pod is in the scenario. And this one, it was kind of on the outside. Enemies aren't really going to lurk into that section very often unless you kind of drag them in there, but you could potentially use this strategically to your advantage if the pod was in the middle of the scenario for sure. If the mission's a success, you get to congratulate yourself on your accomplishment, your achievement, and you're feel free to reset the game. You can try another mission at this point. Of course, you're playing in a campaign situation. There is a section on page 33 which goes into the deep dive campaign in terms of what you're doing in between missions, how you're setting things up, what things are carrying over, how you can spend your resources, upgrade things. Everything you need to know around continuing from mission to mission during the deep dive campaign is right here. And I definitely recommend this for solo players looking for something beyond just one-shot adventures, but it's going to be nice to be able to pull those off whenever you want to and not have to be inside of a campaign structure. And of course, with the flexible difficulty, the ability to play solo with all dwarves, and you're controlling every single one of them and all their unique factors about them, or to say, no, I'd rather a streamlined approach like what you just saw with one dwarf and Bosco. Here's a look at all the resources that I came out of the scenario with. It is worth mentioning that I did think that I had all three of the Apocalypse. There was actually one more right here, which I needed to take in order to get the victory. So we'll put an asterisk next to this victory, although I think I could have easily gotten it based on how well things were going. So just to clear that up, there's also two, maybe three more things I want to mention really quickly before we wrap up the video. For one action and one gold, you can overclock your secondary weapon by simply just spending that and flipping this over to the other side. You'll see you get some nice power-ups from the original version of that gun you can use to your advantage for the rest of the game. Another action you can use, which I didn't end up using, but you certainly will in larger scenarios and tougher ones for sure, is using 3 Nitra. Again, you're able to substitute gold in that situation if you don't have the Nitra, and an action in order to bring a supply pod down, which is going to have more resources. You can place the supply pod on any empty ground space in the cave system that you want, and of course, if it's already in play and you're calling another one, you just move it from where it's currently at. This pod is filled to the brim with vital supplies. You have primary ammo, secondary ammo, you have medicine. If you're adjacent to the pod, you can spend an action to collect supplies. You, of course, can't take more than what you can actually take. But once, of course, all the resources have been taken out of that particular pod, the pod can be taken away. The final thing I want to mention around Deep Rock Galactic is these unexplored tiles that you will find inside of specific scenarios as you go through the mission booklet. Mission number 1 does not have these, but as you go forward, you will find a number of them. They'll look like this in the setup, flipped upside down. You have no idea what's on the other side, and as you, of course, drill your way to them or landscape your way to them with other dwarves, you're going to be able to reveal larger size tiles, which will have a lot more surprises happening all at the same time, and that will certainly shake up the dynamics of the gameplay as you go along. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up this game overview and gameplay video for Deep Rock Galactic. Had a lot of fun with this tabletop adaptation of the video game. Really hope this is an informative video for you. Helps you get the game to the table quicker so you can enjoy it faster. Or if you're looking into it for the very first time, it helps you make an informed decision on whether or not this is for you. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about it in every facet. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.